This is the new Meta, episode 8. We're here with Paul from Three Peaks. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thank you very much.
So to kick us off here, tell us a little bit about how you started the business. When did you start it?
When did I start the business? So I'm a kinesiologist by trade. That's what I did my schooling in at UBC. So I started the clinic, or not so much the clinic, but started the business 14 years ago. That's where I started off. I actually started out of my Volkswagen car at the time.
Nice.
I would drive around doing active rehab from location to location.
Okay.
And that's kind of where it started, and then it's slowly grown over the last 14 years to now where we have the clinic upstairs, and then we've also have a yoga studio, movement studio downstairs, which we're sitting in right now. And so that's kind of where everything started. But I've been a kinesiologist now for almost 20 years, graduated in 2000 from UBC.
Yeah.
So graduated there. And then the first year, as most people after they graduate, it takes a little bit of time. First year I was working at the Pan Pacific serving. They got an opportunity to start working out of their gym facility. And then about 6 months later, I got hired with my first job, which was Harborview Rehab. And I worked there for about 4.5, 5 years.
Wow.
And sort of at that 4.5 year mark, I started to take on some side clientele in the evenings. And then my first son was born, and that was kind of the catalyst to sort of look at jumping out on my own and doing some different things and, the rest of it. So, and then took about a year of doing mobile driving around until my business coach at the time, Kevin Hardy, he said, see if you can locate yourself in one location so people can come to you instead of you wasting a lot of time driving back and forth. And there is still a need for people that are kinesiologists to go to people in community centers and such, and to do active rehab and water rehab and such, but his view was that if you can get people to come to you, it would be better. So I ended up signing a lease at Total Fitness here about, I'd say 12 years ago, somewhere around there. So it was there, a small little closet space, and we started to work out of there and had our clientele mainly come to us. We were still doing some driving and still doing some active rehab in the community and such. That's kind of sort of the catalyst to start it all, and a lot of it was active rehab based. Now what I do is very different. 12 years ago, about the time that we took on the space, just after, I went to a conference up at Whistler, and I ended up stumbling upon a technique called fascial stretch therapy.
Okay.
And so that's mainly what one of our main foundations of our clinic is based on for the kinesiology side, is stretching people out. It's a table-based technique. So we have, the clients on the table, we stretch them, and so on and so forth. And then we've added on multiple techniques since. And we traveled down to Arizona to my mentor down there, Annie Chris Frederick. And then there's another technique which is called AIS, or active isolated stretching. And my mentor from back east, Paul Elliott, we bring him into the clinic to do clinical workshops and such here in Vancouver. In Langley, and it's kind of step by step, and that's one of the big things that kind of built up the clinic. And then there was requests from people for massage therapy, and there were requests, can we get a physiotherapist in, and then same with chiropractic and so on and so forth. So we've just added services kind of almost organically over the last 14 years,
Do you find that people are seeking you out for those special services, or is it kind of more of an education process once they're at the clinic?
So we have individuals that are being referred, especially with us doing the FST for the last 12 years. We have people that they love what it is, they love what we do, so they refer friends. They're like, you need to go see Paul, you need to go see Travis, you need to go see Jess at the clinic. They do fascial stretch therapy. It's awesome. That's really what, it will help you free up your muscles, free up your body and your joints to move well. And then we have amazing physios as well that do IMS therapy. So a lot of people will search out IMS or dry needling, as well as more of a manual based therapy. So our physios do pretty much one-on-one for half an hour with individuals. Some clinics do that. A lot of other clinics, they do what I term as sort of farming, where they go from table to table to table. And we would rather see quality of service one-on-one with our clientele from our physios instead of hopping from table to table. So that kind of is another piece that we try to use to set ourselves apart from the typical physio locations that are out there. And then we have, right now we have 3 RMTs, and massage therapy is always one of those services that people seek out. And our RMTs are booked fairly solid. Some of them are booking 3 months out, all the way out, and then there's sometimes a little bit of a space here and there to get in. So that's, I think the biggest challenge is finding enough practitioners that are high quality practitioners to do the services that are required, as well as the training and so on and so forth.
How do you go about finding those high quality practitioners?
Some of it has been they've been attracted by the reputation of the clinic. So that is one thing, being a clinic that has been around in Langley for 10 years plus. People do know what we do, and they have searched us out. The other thing too is trying to meet different practitioners at courses, and having sort of almost a social media like aspect where you're looking for good people or trying to communicate with good people. So potentially via Facebook or other things like Instagram and so on and so forth, reaching out to individuals and having conversations with them of like, hey, are you looking, we like your skills, we like, hear good things about you. So that's one way of kind of like trying to reach out and find people. But a lot of time as well, you'll put an ad out and then you'll try to bring in the right people as well.
Right. So that's an interesting tactic, because I think a lot of people miss out on the opportunity that social media has, and actually in order to find talent. Because if you represent your culture and what you do, and you have like that good reputation in the marketplace as a whole, and then people can actually visualize that through the social means, then all of a sudden it's a lot easier to attract that talent. And I mean, it helps for sales as well, I'm sure, because people familiarize themselves with your brand. But I think that's you've come across something that not that many people come across, and do social media purposefully to find talent.
I think that it's interesting because there are some younger companies out there right now that are really doing a great job of it. Some of the the amazing millennials that are out there that are just kicking butt and taking names, and people that are a little bit more into marketing aspects. In our space, there's a company called Myo Detox. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of them. They kind of do a lot of that reaching out via social. They've also bought up a lot of clinics and other things. So I kind of look at them and go, wow, it's kind of interesting. There's another great clinic on the North Shore called Coastal Rehab. Dave Leland, he's got one in West Van or North Van, and then another one in Kitts. So I kind of watch what he's doing as a younger up and comer, and really taking names. So kind of reaching out to those amazing people that are in the community. And it's one of those things too. Finding great talent does take time, and there is an adage of hire slowly, let people go quickly is one of those pieces, and
that's a piece that I don't think many people practice.
I
think a lot of people know it.
It's hard to practice it,
but it's very, very hard, because if you're busy, for example, and the person's booked out, and you have no way to fill in the gaps that it would cost to let them go, that's where you fall into the trap of firing them very, very slowly, and it creates toxicity in the workplace and all of this. The other thing that I actually want to touch on, because it was very interesting that you said this, was you're out there looking at best practices that other people are doing, whether it's like social, whether it's like part of your practice. Not reinventing the wheel is something that, we swear by. We never want to reinvent the wheel. We want to take what's already out there and build on it, because the problem is that to reinvent the wheel, it's going to be way slower. So time to results, way slower. But in addition to that, what's important is to understand how it works so that you can then build on it, which is something that very few people actually do.
There is a big, I mean, we've just hired on and you talk about not reinventing the wheel, but finding the right talent and, looking for pieces. We just hired on a physio who's got 20 years experience. So his name is Shaitan, amazing physio. But in essence, you're almost slotting in a person. So you have to do a little bit of up training culturally. You have to do a little bit of, this is how we do things. This is a new style. He was a little bit old school with paperwork. We're now on a system called Jane, which is, mobile and, web-based.
Yeah.
But, that learning curve is really easy.
Yeah. If the willingness is there.
If the willingness is there. And
Yes.
that's another piece you got to look for, is somebody who's willing to learn. So lifelong learning is a big part of my belief and the belief of our clinic, is that we want to see people learning.
Yeah.
If somebody's becoming stagnant and not learning, that's not a good thing. So they need to be learning in their private lives, in their own time. They also need to be looking at what they need to do to help themselves clinically, no matter what the role is. And that's one of the big pieces too.
I think that can't really be understated, because nowadays learning, it's just so much more important because things are changing so quickly, right? And for us, like, lifelong learning, it's a huge tenet of like our business and our values as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest pieces, is that finding those right individuals, it does take time. And that's in all pieces, from the front desk, right through to, our physios, our chiro, our RMTs and such, and trying to build that culture. And it's also one of those pieces too, is that, if you're not focused on culture and you're not focused on certain things, the lack of those pieces will come through. And that's, for me, that's actually been my biggest struggle over the last year and a half, is taking that eye off of how to build the team, taking that time out and being busy. So even myself being, 20 years into this, I think there is, especially in this, in the society that we live in, there's an aspect of getting caught up in being busy.
Yes.
The do all the time, and not focused on, if you are an individual that is leading a team, if you're just doing all the stuff and you're not focused on how am I supposed to lead this team? How am I supposed to make this team better? How am I supposed to build a business? And if you just kind of put yourself into, well, we're making money, and this is what pays the bills, then you can take your eye off that piece, and that can really highly affect, the business in a negative sense. And it's one thing, and I think that's my biggest lesson, is to take time out now and really focus on building staff and building, what do we need to do, focus on the vision of the company, where are we going, how do we want to be better, how do we want to market ourselves. And there are all these things, this aspect of the Instagram lifestyle, and a lot of people will say, is that you're constantly busy. I know people that do that for a living, and they're setting up lots of pieces, and the thing is, do you need to do all that? Do you need to be good at everything that's on the map social media wise? Do you need to do all these other things, or is it just better to just take time for yourself? Right?
Well, it speaks to the urgent versus the important.
Exactly.
And people always put up the urgent over the important. And what we always tell people is, if the house is on fire, it's not enough to just say well, I need to put the fire out. It's, will it burn the house down? Because in the world of business, unlike a real fire, most fires don't burn the business down. They might char the corner a bit, and then if it gets really bad, then you address it. But if there's a fire that business wise gets put on, you can sometimes ignore those for 3 to 6 months, as long as it's not a cultural thing or one of those things that's core to the business. Right? It's that you understand there's an inefficiency. It's no problem, ignore it, because I need to focus on what's important rather than what's urgent.
There is I believe that as well, as the important versus urgent. You can have fires that will char things. And if they're not, the core of stuff, that is one piece. But the other thing too is that if you are able to step back and take that time to focus on the things that are important, those fires shouldn't be starting in the first place.
That's correct.
So that's one of the big things, is you shouldn't be running around like a firefighter, having that firefighter hat on all the time, putting out urgent fires, or even just saying, okay, well, if that's okay, we'll let that burn. the aspects should be like, in there and having that team culture of being able to take those pieces and, change those. You can even have pieces of culture where people may like working for you, but then all of a sudden, gas prices go up. They're living half an hour, instead of half an hour away, they're now moved and they're now an hour away. So now the drive affects them.
Yeah.
And, those pieces too can be, they can wear on people. So you have to take a look at, your whole team.
Yeah.
Right? I find that even finding talent, like where is the talent? How far are they driving? What are they looking for? And those things can change very quickly in our society based on, oh, well, hey, this is this or this is that, and now I have different needs that I'm trying to mitigate. And when you're in a people, you're not a product, creating a solid product, but you're a people-based service.
Yeah.
You're always having to focus on the individuals in your staff. And this is a big piece. And I think the other thing too that, focusing on is, levels of stress with people. People don't talk about, their mental health issues or even sometimes their physical health issues that affect their mental health or just affect them on the workplace. And that's a big thing as well, is like, being able to reach out to your bosses, talk with them. You don't always have to say, hey, this is going on, but being able to actually mitigate what's going on with people is a big thing as well, to be able to support staff and help them out on those pieces. And those are always interesting aspects that myself and my business partner as bosses have to take a look at now. Much more than in the past, where you just kind of like, okay, person's having a bad day and you move on from it. There's much more concerns with what do you need to do for your staff, and how do you need to do it. And I don't think I've always wanted that. I don't think I've always lost at that, but there's pieces and lessons that you can take from how do you mitigate that culture.
Yeah. And I think there's in business there's a fine line between like sympathy and empathy. It's like when it's like sympathy, you feel what they feel, and then you just take their stance, and then you're not finding solutions. Whereas empathy, that's where you're actually helping people find solutions. And a lot of people go to that sympathy place, and that's okay to do once in a while for like a little bit. But if you're being sympathetic too much and not empathetic, you're gonna basically put that person into this negative pattern. By sympathizing with them, you actually have to say like, okay, like I understand what you feel. It's not great where this is, or I totally get it. But moving forward, like what are the steps that you and I need to put into place in order to like make this work and overcome that adversity that is potentially there. Right? It's
a big piece. And like we all have these things as sort of entrepreneurs and individuals that are employing people. But yeah, as I say, you look at a lot of different pieces and spaces with where people are coming from, and it's much more on the forefront now with individuals. And that's one of the things. You talk about, okay, how do you say build culture, right? It's one of the big ones as well. And I would say as well is like focusing on defining a culture within the team is a big piece, and that's another piece that we did a number of years ago, but we need to redo. And even myself as the entrepreneur, I can say we have to redo that piece. Right. We have to redefine that aspect of defining that culture and bringing in potentially somebody to really help like look at that. Right. And I think that's another thing too, is that a lot of companies will have a culture 2-3 years ago. And then they don't kind of update that culture, or they don't look at that culture and they're like, oh, it's fine. Well, at times you need to actually look at it, and you need to re-explore it. You
do really need to manage it, because as you bring more people into the team, that culture can take on a life of its own. And that could be a good thing, or can be a bad thing for the business. But you really have to make sure it's in line with what you're trying to do.
And it is inevitable, right? Like it's people always talk about culture. It's like growing a garden. It's like weeds naturally crop up, different plants get planted, but it's about once in a while taking a step back, to your point, and assessing, like, is this the right, are we going in the right direction here? And sometimes, you know, you gotta redirect where it's going.
Yeah.
But I think that people think it's like, well, the culture where it's going isn't where I want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they see that as a bad thing, but it's ultimately, like, businesses have a life of their own, like they're their own entity.
Yeah.
And there's not much you can do about that except constantly assess and reassess,
Yeah.
you know, periodically, because you can't keep your finger on it 100% of the time.
Yeah. And the thing is, like you said, when you bring in somebody new, there will always be an effect on culture.
Yeah.
Right? No matter who it is. You know, you can also have changes in people's lives that will affect culture. You know, we as individuals, you know, we have our home lives and then we have our business lives. And most people don't realize that they spend probably more time in their business life
Yeah.
than they do in their home life.
Yeah.
And that is a big piece of, like, you know, what are you looking at? And I always say is that we should be a family. Now, families can be dysfunctional at times, right?
Yeah.
And you can have arguments at times in families, and you can have different points of views within families. And that's one of the things too, within a business, you'll have those pieces as well, right? And, you know, mitigating those, determining what you need to do is a big piece of, you know, building that aspects of, you know, success. I think, you know, that's really, you know, mitigating that culture, working on culture and such. And, you know, I don't think, you know, if you kind of look at the Googles of the world or the different things, you know, the big, you know, downtown ones, you know, where they have like slides and this, that, and the next thing in workrooms, that, you know, is culture, but it really a lot of time isn't culture as well, right? It's just,
It can be very superficial.
It can be that. And so, you know, you have to look at that piece and say, okay, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know, how do we need to change?
People, like, mistake perks for culture all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you're getting free stuff or lunches or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that really culture? Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like ping pong table and a foosball table. That's not culture,
Yeah.
right? It's just a free perk of
Of
the
what I do.
workplace.
Yeah. And then the other part as well, the free foosball table and free ping pong table, they may also have a aspect of, well, those are releases, but we expect you to work, you know, this many hours and get this much done, and you're on a tight deadline. So there are different aspects to culture all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. Is, like I said, you know, I know that, you know, our clinic's culture per se isn't the most perfect in any way, and we need to, you know, work on pieces. But I think that's also being an entrepreneur, is actually able to say that.
Yeah.
You know, and healthily say that, and even in an interview say that to somebody. You know, like, hey, you know, this is this, and, you know, I think that, you know, people don't understand is that, you know, you make it past that first year, you make it past that second year. Okay, we're doing okay. Make it to the 5-year mark. All right. Well, after that, you know, people say, okay, businesses are going to run. Well, not always.
No. And in what
I've
form?
I've watched businesses fail at the 10-year mark. I've watched
100%,
businesses fail at the 20-year mark in my space. And it's, you know, one, either they're not changing,
right,
or two, the entrepreneur, you know, either sells it off to somebody, so you have a change in the main person, or you have something else that changes that aspect, and you can have those aspects of things failure. But I think it's, you know, looking at it and saying, okay, what were we doing in first year? What were we doing in second year? If we're looking from this point and it's a brand new business, what do we need to do to make changes? Like, you know, what's going to make the workflow better? What's going to make people want to be there because they're comfortable and such, right? We just changed our front desk this weekend, right? So we have our front desk right now, you know, torn out this weekend, put back in, you know, we got a new tech guy upstairs, putting everything in so that the workflow is better for our, you know, administrative assistants at the front. To me, that's a big piece, because, you know, what was working before wasn't working. And, you know, it's identified as we need this space to be better. And then it's also picking out other pieces within the clinic of, okay, well, what else do we really want to do to change? You know, we need to make changes to, say, the weight room for our clientele. That's the next piece that we're working on. So, as you say, finding those urgent things and finding those things you need to work on is really important, as well as saying, okay, well, how many hours do we need to be billing? at the same time, and what do I need to be billing at
Yeah.
to make it work?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, sometimes people, they'll get into the yes mode, or,
Yeah.
they don't look at what do we need to do or how do we need to do it to make it work. And then, the other thing, and I see this in not only my spaces of like the health, but I see it in other spaces. You'll have a brand new business come out of the chute, and they want to, look at themselves as a company that's been established for 10 years. So they want absolutely everything under the sun.
Right.
The brand new, like top-notch, like, computers or systems or whatever it is that's needed. Instead of saying, okay, can we do this with less? There's very much, can we get absolutely everything? So I want, in my games, it'd be, can we get, 2 new lasers? We need a whole bunch of, shock waves. We need a bunch of stem units, and we need the top level beds, and we need to look like this, and we want a designer in to do all these things. And then at the end of the day, they're saddled by this huge sort of cost that is going to grind on them month to month to month.
Yeah.
Whereas they would have started off with, okay, well, we don't need 10 beds, we don't need this. There's 2 practitioners.
Right.
We're going to grow our team, but let's grow our team,
Yeah.
organically. I've seen that happen as well with a number of places. Then they believe that they're going to be able to bring people in and such. And the talent pool is deep here in Vancouver, but at the same time, it can be, it's multiple places. You're having to attract those individuals, and you're having to interview those individuals.
Yeah.
And there's lots of potential offers for those individuals.
It can be a challenge if you're overly optimistic, right? And you're not looking at what's potentially, what if things don't go the way that I expect? Like, how are we going to do it then?
Yeah.
Right? And being practical and conservative in how you build the operations of the business, it makes a lot of sense, especially when, like you're saying, you don't have that history of knowing what that's going to look like, right? Especially if you're starting out.
Yeah. So, those are big pieces that I look at kind of in regards to, new people out of the chute that I would say as entrepreneur, shoestring yourself.
Yeah.
That's what we've done.
Yeah.
For, 14 years, we've shoestring ourselves. It has its positives, but at the same time, if we're looking at something and there's a spend, we'll be like, okay, why do we need it?
Yeah.
And then, does it have that return, that ROI that people are looking for?
So you guys have grown pretty much organically and through quality of work, quality of service, and referrals for the last 20 years. How are you finding, what's the biggest challenge to growth these days? Is it, besides the talent, because that's going to
It's a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
So talent is a big one. The other piece is, when we first established ourselves here in Walnut Grove, there weren't as many businesses. So now there are
Right.
much more competition.
Yeah.
So you have to realize that is part of the organic growth, that there's going to be more competition. So, you have more clinics here in Langley because of the growth, but you also have more populace. So, and the other thing too is I try to work really closely with a lot of the different clinics that are around. So I don't look at any of the other clinics as competition. I look at them as friends.
Yeah.
Right? That we have different slight services, we have similar services, but there's more than enough pie to go around. I think the biggest thing right now for attracting new clients in and getting people in is that reach.
Yeah.
Because people are so busy and people are so distracted with things. And it's kind of like, that aspect of Twitter or, Instagram. Can you make that quick little flash?
Yeah.
Get somebody's attention and get them in. But, that's part of it. So you're looking at, so what do you need to do to get people in? Back in the day it was a phone book. Now it's not.
Yeah.
Phone books have died like the dodo birds. They're gone like the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So now you look at, okay, how are you ranking on Google? How are you, so people can call.
And that's where a lot of people are making their decisions, right?
Yeah.
Before they even go to the website, they've already decided based on who's listed there,
And the
what are the
reviews.
top 3 people
Yeah.
that they're going to reach out to.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Facebook is another one that, you can organically sort of work within the brick and mortar piece and look at your sort of demographic area, and that's another one of reaching out. But you're always also having to look at how those social media companies are limiting your reach.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are limiting your reach with that and wanting you to spend.
Yeah.
So it's always a give and take. How much are we going to budget for our Facebook advertisement? How are we going to do it? This is like your realm of what you guys do, and you guys are experts on that. And then what are you going to do with, say, Instagram or Twitter? And how can you make it so you're actually getting that reach out to people? And then the other piece is, I think, community, like really getting out in the community, because people want to know people. And that's one of the big things I've always said, is that I would prefer to do business with a person face to face. And that might be a little old school, but that's really where I'd rather make my decisions, is getting to know somebody and what they're doing, and will this help me? You're right, compared to like looking there. So getting out to community events is a big one that we've been doing. We've done, say, the Family Day almost every year since it started here in Langley. We have done other charity events. We give a lot of gift bags to charity events, and sometimes we do golf tournaments where we set up and do face-to-face golf tournaments where we're doing treatments for the golfers. There's other things with runs and other things we've done in the past. So it's getting out to the community. Can you find people? Can you show them what you do? And go from there. And when we started, I think this is where I think sometimes, that aspect of we can do everything via, say, social media, whereas, you can look at, that face-to-face piece. When we started, we would do weekends all the time of stuff like that. Over and over again, what event can we get to, this, that, and the next thing. We've slowed that down a little bit, but I think as new practitioners as well, that's a big piece that needs to be there for them. Anyone starting in this space, getting out, no matter where you are, and actually meeting people is a big one. Joining different things like Rotary, joining things like the Chamber, joining things, other groups that are out there. You'll make contacts, you'll make referrals that way. Supporting your local businesses around you so they know what you do, and you can contact them and, hey, I've got a referral for you. Oh, thank you so much. So that face-to-face piece, I think, is a really big piece, as well as increasing the overall reach. And I think stepping back from it, that we've not done as much as we have done, say, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, to now. And that's a piece that I look and say, okay, well, I'd like to do more of that. Right. And once again, it's about talent. It's about getting your talent out there. And working with those pieces of how can I, get my staff out there. If I'm already busy, great. But how can I help build the other team members up? Right. And the other piece too is that I think, as much as people say, it's almost do you have a barber that you go to?
Yeah, actually, my hair is super longer now because he moved to Kelowna.
So you moved to Kelowna.
So he referred me to somebody.
So you referred
but I hesitated
You're still
for a couple extra weeks.
So this is a good thing, because I would say hairdressers and barbers are one that people have an affinity for.
Yes.
Therapists are very much like that. So people will wait for a certain therapist. They're like, oh, you can see this person. So a lot of that trust as well is referring that person within your clinic, or growing it organically, of being able to step people down. But it's the same thing as a barber. Right? You've got a referral from a barber to go see another barber. And you're like, oh, well, okay. Is this what I want to do? So there is that aspect, that person, when you have an individual in a clinic that has a unique skill, say FST like myself, and say somebody says, oh, I'm moving to Vancouver. Right. Who do you know there? Then I'll refer them. But it's the same thing here, right? You may have said, oh, I have a great barber, you need to go see him. And now you're looking for a new barber. So sometimes it's also that ability to test things out. Right.
Interestingly, how I got referred to the barber that actually just moved, which was maybe 3 years ago, was that somebody referred me to them. And then the first thing I asked them was, do they have a website or an Instagram? They're like, here's their Instagram. I looked through their Instagram and I was like, okay, the quality of haircut is very high based on everything that I'm seeing. and then I book the appointment.
Yeah.
But I would have never gone out to even search that had I not asked somebody else first.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think I asked 2-3 people and I did the same process, and I was like, well, this guy's the best based on what I can visually see from the outside in.
Yeah. Time and time again, what we're seeing is that, you can't ignore quality of the service. And when you take that quality and then you just put it on display, on social media, whether it's through reviews, however it is, you're basically saying, you're putting it out there, because there's a lot of small business owners especially who have really great quality, they've got a great service, but they don't tell anyone about it, right? Because they're a little too humble or whatever is the case. And so they're just kind of they're doing their job. They're doing a great job, but nobody knows that they're doing a great job.
I also think that word of mouth over the past few years has it's decreased if you don't count its digital counterpart, where people are referring people online.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and you touched on this earlier, people are busier now than they've ever been before.
They are.
It's almost like an illness. It's like the busy illness, and because they're so busy, the word of mouth thing happens less and less.
Yeah.
So now that the digital side has to supplement that, and people are making decisions through the digital means of, well, okay, I got referred to this, that, or wherever. First thing you do, like, Google them. Do they have reviews? How many? What's the star count? Same thing with Facebook, and or asking other people. But I truly believe that word of mouth, when you take the digital side out, is way down. If you add in the digital side, it's way up.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on that perfectly, as you said with your barber.
Yeah.
First thing I did, I went to Instagram. I took a look at that, right?
Yeah.
So there is a piece of, what do you need to do digitally to enhance your business? And, there are things as well. I think my biggest frustration as a business owner is websites.
Yeah.
And I know you guys specialize in that, but it's also the aspect of, you can go a year and it can be almost out of date. So you're then having to look at, how are we changing this? So, websites now are no longer what they once were. Put it up, leave it, it's all good.
Yeah.
Maybe change your pricing and go from there. Now it's become almost an organic piece as well.
Yeah.
And, some people will look at, how does that function? What's the functionality of the website? What's the functionality of, okay, I Googled them. What is their, Instagram? What's their Twitter feed? What's this?
Nowadays, the website is really the most important piece online. And as a small business, you can get away with things like a Facebook page, sure. But really, like, when you're a little bit bigger, like, the website is how people judge you, based on first impression. What's the quality look like? Is it consistent with the brand, right? And all those other pieces that you mentioned, like the SEO, it's, if you're not doing it right, well, then people aren't going to find you either. Yeah. So it is such a crucial piece, and it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't stop changing. You're constantly updating, constantly working on that.
And that's, I think, especially as a business owner, you've got to look at that piece and really go, okay, it's been a year and a half. What on our sites do we need to change, right? How is it more interactive or reactive? A lot of people say, oh, you need to be blogging or vlogging. I don't really always believe that you need to be blogging or vlogging. That's, for some companies, that works really, really well. It is a strategy. It's one I haven't employed. And it may work better. But at the same time, how much time are you going to be dedicating to that piece? Is that, creating what you want? If you're doing, I've got to do this, I got to have this, as you say, that busyness aspect, right? Sort of like, we've got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Really, the ones that are really creating the change are the A, B, C, and the E, F, and G, and H, and I. Those ones aren't changing.
Yeah.
So, what are you doing here? And okay, well, maybe D.
Yeah.
But
well, it's two things. It's industry, right? It depends on the industry quite a bit. It also depends on size of business, right? So what takes you from point A to point B is different from point B to point C, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And most people don't understand that. So what happens is that, I say a lot of businesses, in their first year or first 6 months, they're like, okay, we need to do a whole bunch of marketing. It's like, no, you need to go get sales. right? Like if you look at sales and marketing as two sides of the same coin, which is revenue, there's a point in the business's growth cycle where marketing does become more important than sales, but it's not when you're kicking this whole thing off, right? Specifically for revenue generation, sales always comes first, and then after a certain period of time, marketing becomes more important because you have top line revenue such that it's impossible to leverage yourself like to grow the way that you've been growing, because at one point, like it's like landing a new client that comes in twice a week, for example, at some point can be 2-3% of your revenue, but as time goes on it becomes 0.5% of your revenue, or an even smaller percentage, where the volume is now not manageable to generate through pure sales activity. This is when marketing needs to actually leverage you up, because marketing is almost like that multiplier effect.
It is.
But if you try to multiply zero, if you have no sales today and you try to multiply zero, nothing comes of it, right? So it's really interesting, like when you're mentioning blogs and especially content marketing works really well once you're trying to create leverage. But if you're just trying to generate sales, it's like that looks a lot like SEO, getting some reviews, like doing like the basics right so that you're easy to find. Right? And that's more sales oriented than content strategy, which is more of a brand orientation. And at that point, if you want to build your brand early, you have to do that by having like maybe not vlogs, but going on the live functions of social media, if you're comfortable with that in today's day and age. But the other path that is the opposite of that in the non-digital side is attending these community events, because that's really kind of what it is in the offline side.
And you could do both. You could attend
and then
exactly event, do a live feed. Hey, we're here, and you can combine those pieces.
Absolutely.
But I think especially for the younger entrepreneurs out there that are in this sort of space of healthcare, I find that some of them aren't doing like those pieces, or they're like, you look at younger individuals coming even into a business, contractor and an employee. You have to brand yourself as well, and this is another piece that you need to create your own avatar for you as a practitioner, as a person in business. And I think that is something that people need to do more of, so that they become the experts. So when you're coming into a business, it's not just on the people that have been there for a long time that have those reputations built over 20 years, and people are like, oh, I always hear about you, or I always hear about Travis. Well, Travis has been doing this 15 years. Right. I've been doing this almost 20 years. So, it's taken me almost 20 years to get to that point where people are like, oh, hey, I've heard of you, through multiple different people, through word of mouth, or through reputation. If you're brand new, you've got to build that avatar. You've got to build that piece. You've got to reach out to people. You got to start looking for, who do I know? What courses do I need to go to? How can I build myself up quicker? And I think that's the big thing, is like learning through lots of different avenues. And as you said right at the beginning, was not reinvent the wheel. So if I get back to sort of like my specialty of FST, when I was starting that, I was about 5 years into business, or not into business, but into being a kinesiologist. So I just started my business about a year in, and I had what I thought was a wheel, right? So I had a wheel, and I think a lot of it is systems as well. Some people have become very short-sighted with some of the business advice they've been given, where they look at it and they don't see a client as somebody you can have a client work with you. Even with your changing of techniques and changing of things, you can work with them for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And they're lifelong clients. They may not see you for, like in my business, they may not see me until they're hurt. It might be a 2-year gap. Right. But then they're like, I need to come in. This is who I trust. This is where I want to go. And that is a big piece of building that. Like, I mean, Carissa, you've been I think it's 10 years approximately.
Since
so
I was
it's 10
14.
years that she's been, a client of mine.
Right.
Which is a huge, like, I watched her grow up, which is really cool, right? And that to me is, that's a big marker of your success.
And that's also part of being a part of the community.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is a big part of being in the community, and seeing those individuals, individuals come back, or bring their kids, or so on and so forth, and those are those life long ones, right? So when you get up into there, and I said, sometimes I sit there and I think that, I've only been doing this for a year or two, and I'm like, it's almost my 20th year. That's
how it feels, though.
That's sometimes how it feels, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I've been doing this like this long.
Yeah.
And that is a piece of that aspect of trying to really look at what you need to do to retain business. And I think that's the long my business coach Kevin said to me, he's like, it's not a sprint.
No.
Right? It's not a sprint. You might be sprinting from point to point, or speeding up and slowing down. It's like, this is not even a marathon. This is an ultra marathon.
Yeah.
You have to have that really long view of things. You're going to separate things up into small workable pieces,
Yeah.
but you got to take the long view on a lot of pieces. We talked as well about, cultural changes or changes. The other thing too, as a business owner, is that you've got to understand that you're going to have ebbs and flows. So you're going to have, for us, you're going to have practitioners come in,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have practitioners leave. You're going to have administrators come in, you're going to have administrators leave. And this is something that you as a business, it can be stressful, but you also have to be able to mitigate that. And,
Yeah.
People flow in businesses, and they are your assets, and they are there to help you, and to help the business grow. And at times they're going to outgrow the business per se, and they're going to move on. You have, as a business owner, you have to also say, okay, here's your wings, go.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece too to look at, of helping those other individuals branch out to where they need to go, and are they successful.
Yeah.
And then training more.
Yeah.
Right. So
So,
that's a big piece.
We're getting to kind of the end of this here.
Yes,
So,
I see that.
what would be your number one or two piece of advice for a new entrepreneur?
Number one piece of advice for new entrepreneurs is, don't be afraid. Don't really be afraid to try it. You're going to fail. Point blank, you're going to fail. You're going to fail over and over again. Don't be afraid of those small failures. Take that long view of things. Don't overcommit. Really keep yourself on a sort of budgetary, how can I shoestring this? How can I focus on people first? Always people first. That's really what I would say is really the number one piece is, don't be afraid and focus on people, no matter what your business is. Create those connections. Because if you create those connections, they'll last. And that will be your success.
Well, and it's interesting because, because failure is inevitable, that's why you have to shoestring things and not bet the farm.
Yeah.
Because if you assume you're not going to fail at all,
Yeah.
you over leverage yourself, and that's where bad things happen. So you have to, to your point of the long view, if you don't take that long view and you're like, I'm all in on this one thing, it doesn't work out, you're done.
Yep.
So you have to play the game in a way where you're trying to play it infinitely.
Exactly. And you're going to play the game every day. Every day you get up, you
Yeah.
smile, you put on your masks, as they say,
Yeah.
and you go and do it.
Yeah.
And you're going to have great days, and you're going to have really bad days, but don't judge your bad days on it, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're angry, if you're upset, you can't see, there was a quote that I saw, which is, you can't see your reflection in steam. Right, which is, if you're angry,
Yeah.
or you're frustrated about something, or you're even sad about something, you're not going to see that reflection. You're not going to be able to actually look and see that reflection in the water per se, if it's boiling.
Yeah.
Right, so you've got to kind of take yourself out of those pieces, and those best days or those worst days, it's either end, that super high or that super low. It's more in the middle that you really want to be making great decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Because those emotions will take you out a little bit too. So we're emotional, beings,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you got to kind of look at those pieces, right?
Yeah. And you really have to enjoy the work, right? Because
You do.
The whole entrepreneur lifestyle is really being glamorized, and
It's not nearly as glamorous as
No.
people make it out to be
No.
at all.
No.
It's only glamorous if you love what you do.
It is. If you really love what you do, you won't work a day in your life.
No.
but you will work on certain things because there are things at being an entrepreneur that you're not going to be good at.
100%. That you're not going to like either.
And that you're not going to like. So there's going to be days you're going to work because you're not going to like those things. You got to realize those pieces. The other thing too is find experts. So find people that are better than you at whatever it is and learn from them. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah. But you know what? Our ego tries to take us there,
It always does.
right? But that's where you have to like check it, you know, and realize that if you surrounded yourself with the right people, that when they're speaking about their area of expertise, that you should do a whole lot of listening and maybe not so much talking.
Exactly.
So, excellent.
Okay.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. How do we wrap it up again?
Thank them.
Yeah,
We'll
thanks,
cut
Paul.
after this part.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
It's been great listening to your
Thank you very
your
much.
journey. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you for coming in and, you know, checking out the yoga studio and doing the interview here and, you know, taking some of my time. And I greatly appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sweet.